Hey, Matthew.
Hey, how's it going, Warner?
I'm fine. It's always good seeing you. I'm quite excited about our second episode of Code and Capital.
What are we going to talk about today?
Well, it's been a busy week in terms of announcements in the news. Some very interesting announcements. Nadella from Microsoft, the CEO of Microsoft, there were three specific announcements. The sequence, number one, was interesting. One of his first announcements was that Microsoft is actually cutting back on some of their data center leases.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, which just indicates that the demand isn't quite what they expected. The second one was where he cautioned against the hype around AI and AGI and the fact that value creation is still being questioned.
Mm-hmm.
And that even he is tired of all the associated AI hype. And then the third one, which I think probably generated the most attention, is the announcement of Microsoft's new, we can debate that, and we will, quantum computing chip.
Oh, yes.
Yep, and how he believes that brings quantum computing forward from a few decades to a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So from an investment point of view, I can understand the sequence. For me, there was a bit of caution. We're pulling back on some of our investments, and then there was also a commitment to something new, something innovative. But what's really going on here?
I think it's a case of all sizzle, no steak, but that's me coming out of this from an angle of a computer scientist.
So tell me more.
Sure. So it just is very convenient. At the same time that they're canceling all these leases, they just so happen to have a new piece of technology that they're coming into play with.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So for the listener out there that doesn't quite know what I'm talking about, Microsoft has released a new chip, and they're saying that this chip that they're putting out in a commercial space is a quantum computer chip. You can go and buy it off the shelf, and you yourself can own a quantum computer. The thing about this is that there's some controversy and skepticism with regards to this due to the fact that there hasn't been a research paper coming out of Microsoft demonstrate how this technology works, and a lot of people are scratching their heads saying, what are you doing that's fundamentally different than everybody else? And at the same time, why do you put it's a quantum computer chip, and on the same chip you have a classical, like just a regular CPU computer? It makes no sense. Like, why not just, if you need the two together, wouldn't it just be better to have a mechanical computer separate, because you're just making both of them equally crappy by putting them on the CPU? So there's a lot of computer scientists and engineers and physicists just kind of scratching their head going, huh? Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense from what I've heard and what I've reached out to my colleagues. So yeah, I see this as like, this is just another hype train that Microsoft is trying to use to differentiate itself from NVIDIA and everybody else out there.
I would agree with you. Quantum computing is something that, as a non-coder, I understand the concept. I understand the complexity around it. Just don't ask me to explain it to somebody. But just before our recording, we were talking about this, and you mentioned something very interesting and I know that for a fact. This is not Microsoft's first foray into quantum computing.
No.
They tried it in 2018, and it didn't go too well.
No.
But you also mentioned something that there's already quantum computers available.
Yes.
And the reality is that this is probably more a hype than a real innovative development. So tell me a little bit more about the fact, because the general public wouldn't know that quantum computers, unless they read into that space, they wouldn't know it's available.
Mm-hmm. So, like, people also don't know what a Silicon graphics workstation is, and the reason why.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, so, like, back in the day, so this is, like, before even my time, this stuff my professor told me about is Dr. Diamond used to work on a machine called a Silicon graphics workstation, and the concept behind this is that you have this giant honking supercomputer, and you can ask it general questions like, hey, like what's the average of like all these different data sets, and it computes it for you. And sure, we have that now in like a spreadsheet, and that's convenient, and it's like super accessible. But back in the day, that's how they used to do it for large data sets, is they would have a machine chunk like away at all this data. So having a quantum computer be able to answer complex questions, or what we consider complex questions now, 40 years in the future probably are not going to be complex questions that we need a really honking large computer for. So what a quantum computer is used for nowadays is we use it for everything from protein folding assessments. So like we can sit there and say normally with a mechanical computer, hey, like here's a bunch of different proteins. How do you fold them in different ways so that or different amino acids? How do you fold them into proteins in different ways to figure out new solutions to bio problems? Like can we find cures for diseases, new vaccines, all kinds of different cool things. And that's useful in that space. Its main thing of controversy that it's got all us computer scientists freaked out is in cryptography. Like if you are listening to this audio right now, you're probably on a website, and that website is using something called SSL, Secure Socket Layer. So if you have a machine that could compute all possible passwords that we could use for all possible cryptography within seconds, then you have the ability that you can just get into YouTube and just do literally whatever you want. You can steal anybody. If somebody was using SSL to use banking online, you could steal their bank information. You could do all these horrible things.
So just to put it in very layman terms, this is kind of the imitation game, just like where they broke the code machine during the Second World War.
That is very much it, yes. So like
this is
they're seeing what breaks.
Much higher level, but the implications are the same.
Yes.
Okay, go on.
So if we have a machine that can compute, and again, like we can use it for cryptography, we can use it for all kinds of different pieces of technology and different problems out there, from modern medicine to traffic flow diagrams of like how to modernize urban traffic, to stock market predictions, to health crisis outbreaks, like when's the next, if there is going to be another COVID, like when's the next COVID going to happen, what's the risk associated with it. So we can use it to compute all kinds of different things. The question is are the computations feasible? Because there's a scientist out there, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's got a joke, and he's like, if you're going to do a science experiment, it should probably finish within your lifetime.
Yeah, I get that.
So this allows us to do certain experiments and compute certain answers that we can do now in feasible amounts of time rather than doing it in hundreds of years.
And we might end up with just a continuous stream of options, answers, potential answers, solutions. Okay. But you told me that it's already available. So I know Google, as an example, did some tests on quantum computing.
Well, they came out in October 2019, I'm going to say, is when they had their big first release. So that's when Google came out to the public saying like, hey, we've met a certain threshold called quantum supremacy.
Correct.
So quantum supremacy is when you can demonstrate that you have a quantum computer and it can solve a problem faster than a classical computer. And that's when you say, at least for this problem, whatever that problem is, now we've demonstrated quantum supremacy, and now we're off to the arms race, which is how many other problems can we turn quantum supremacy on so that's better than mechanical computers at? And that's where we're at right now.
Because I think if I remember correctly, they said what would have taken a quadrillion years took them a few seconds.
Yes.
Now, again, you were mentioning a specific Canadian company. Can we talk about it?
Sure. Like, without giving, I mean, like everybody can kind of, take your Joe Rogan hat, put your on, do your homework.
Anything that's available in the
So, like, there's a Canadian company out there. They're based in, I believe, Ottawa. At least they were based in Ottawa. They came out with a quantum computer years ago. They initially like had a release where they said, "Hey, everybody, we have a quantum computer," and it like actually works. And people thought they were being silly. Google lined up to be like one of their first customers. Google tested it out. Shortly after Google tested it out, the American government said, hey, like Canada, we need to get in there and secure the servers for this thing, because this is the real deal. And there seems to be like a bit of a problem with just like letting that out into the open now.
Yep.
So
We don't want that to happen.
like if you look at even like large military institutions in the United States, they're using cryptography to hide all their wonderful documents. Maybe if you take a trip to Mar-a-Lago, you can find something in the toilet. Maybe something's still there. But typically these documents are encoded behind like some kind of firewall with a crypto key behind it.
Yeah.
So by using this kind of technology, it threatens these institutions because you could just fire this piece of technology off and say, give me, and just take everything that's currently on their servers from them. Because most of these things are protected by like some kind of password, right? That's why we have laws in Canada saying like if you use different pieces of technology to break digital passwords, that's a felony and you could be put in prison for it.
Yep.
So now this is just, we can say, oh, like it's a felony, we can put you in prison. But if you have a quantum computer that can just blast and just steal everything all at once, maybe we need more than just laws to protect us. Maybe we need actual intrusion prevention detection systems.
Tell me more about that, because I'm following this. It's very interesting. I don't think the average Joe Blogger is going to see any real direct benefits from quantum computing. Of course, there's a lot of indirect benefits that will come from this. But to me, it sounds like, every single security layer that's out there currently that we all depend on is going to be null and void, or potentially null and void, or can be cracked very simply with quantum computing becoming commercially available.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. So what is your solution to that? You've just alluded to that.
Yeah, so like everybody's like freaking out saying quantum computer is going to destroy us, and I feel like it's a bit of the Y2K. It's I'm not even there. So guys, like I don't mean to be mean, but as computer scientists, we're not sleeping at the wheel. Like we are paying attention to what's going on here.
It's not about sleeping at the wheel. We're more worried about the self-driving mode.
Yeah. So,
that's what worries me.
Yeah, there's things like IPDS, intrusion prevention detection systems. The idea behind here is like you probably have used a website that has said like, hey, we need to set up two-factor authentication on your phone. That is an example.
Too often.
Yeah, too often. That's right. So these are policies that come into effect where we sit there and say like, how do we game a system where we add entropy, where we say like, hey, you have to have a password that has like certain letters and certain characters in it to make it harder to guess. We have to have a two-factor authentication. You can only have so many attempts of a password, and then you have to shut you down. You have to like go through a two-factor authentication again. So these are all components of a policy and SOP that goes into intrusion prevention detection systems. So it makes it so like even if there is a quantum computer that can just guess everything all the time, it still has to play by the game where mechanically you only have 5 attempts. So you have 5 attempts at a password, then we shut down your account. Sure, you know every single password that has ever existed and ever will exist. You got 5 shots. So which one is it?
Okay.
Because that's, again, like these systems, a quantum computer cannot tell you this is Werner's password for his Gmail account or like whatever. It doesn't have that ability to say this is the answer. It says I'm going to compute all potential possible answers.
And I'm going to do it super fast.
And I'm going to do it super fast.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. So, I mean, both you and I agree then that the announcement was probably more a bit of a way to game up investment.
Yeah.
To offset some other decisions. And that quantum computing isn't going to end the world. And that also for founders and small business owners or business owners, it's something just, if they're interested in it, something to keep up to date with, but not really more than that. Correct?
Yeah, like there's like I don't see business owners, small or medium business owners going out saying, "Man, I can't wait to buy my quantum computer." Like,
no, please not.
Like I don't see how like that's practical or has like any benefit to them.
Yes, exactly.
But with regards to like, is there indirect benefits? Sure. Like there's going to be research companies out there that buy a quantum computer and use it to fold a protein in a certain way and go, "Eureka! Like we found a new cure for this disease."
So it is the next wave for cloud computing then.
Oh, for sure. Like we're going to see it like at an industrial scale. Like we get in cloud computing, we have 101 tools that we can use, and this is just going to be the next one that we use.
Yeah. Okay. Let's park that. Let's talk about his other announcement his comment where he was talking about being a little bit tired of the hype around AI.
Mm.
And I know you and I feel that same way. Many times, although we use it every day, we still get tired of the hype.
Mm.
But where he also questions the value, the economic value, more my kind of language, where he questions the economic value that's being currently delivered, or what they are beginning to see being generated by people using AI. And it also comes back a little bit to what I've mentioned last week, is that I think for most people, AI, ChatGPT as an example, or Claude, is kind of a supercharged search engine. It just replaces Google.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But there's very little direct economic value creation out of it. However, I also know that you are busy with, I think, your third startup.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that it is AI driven.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that you didn't start by selling AI, that the whole approach was, how can I help that specific business measure and create value? So it was a very value-driven approach.
Yeah, the whole purpose on
So
it is...
explain that.
Yeah, like when I started the startup, the concept was around how do I help businesses that are in the food space generate more revenue. This came from the philosophy of there's all these people in the Maritimes and they crank my...
Can I just
Okay,
interrupt
go
you?
ahead.
Was it more revenue or more revenue and value?
Yeah, revenue and value is a better way of
It's
saying it.
two
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah. No, you're right. So the concept here was there's all these companies in Atlantic Canada and they make food, and a lot of them are struggling. Like, as much as people say, like, everybody's doing great in Atlantic Canada, a lot of these companies are working on smaller margins. Yeah. They're selling less and less all the time. That's just because consumers are strapped for cash, and a lot of people are trying to look at where they can stretch their money right now.
Absolutely.
So with regards to that, we don't have a problem. Like, we've for like about a decade now in Atlantic Canada, not even Atlantic Canada, Canada as a whole, have been putting a lot of money, whether it be government funds, angel capital, VC, into developing quote unquote innovative functional food products. And I'm not here to dispute that. I'm not there to get into that space or anything like that.
Different subject for
different subject.
Yeah.
So, but we've put a lot of money into this space, and there's a tremendous amount of companies that are producing food, and it's not actually getting to people's shopping carts, and it's not like getting into their hands. It's just kind of like a lot of these companies are, I wouldn't say stagnating right now, but they're not getting like these really high growth returns that they expected. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of cranking investors, it's cranking government. Everybody's kind of stressed out about it. And I go like, hold up, guys. Like, we don't have a problem producing food. Like, there's a lot of food producers, small businesses in Nova Scotia that love making food. The problem is like marketing it, figuring out who is your audience and why do they buy your product, and ultimately, how do you grow this? Is this a thing that's going to take off, or is this like a niche thing that, like, just my friends and families members are into? So the concept of Black Anvil and what I want to do here is to say, like, can there be some way that I can present this company and what they're working on to a larger audience, or get more people involved in this without the founder actually having to put in like a lot of effort into what they're doing? Is it just something that can tack on and value add to what the founder is doing to help build out their story?
I want to interrupt you as well.
Sure.
Just for a second. And what I want you to do is explain how design thinking fits into this approach.
Ooh.
Because, and there's a reason why I'm asking it, because most food companies will have some kind of strategy. If it's not on paper, it's in their heads. Let's not debate that either. Mm-hmm. However, strategic thinking by its very nature is linear. And then, of course, everybody will tell you to be agile. Again, let me not go down into that rabbit hole. But design thinking, more and more people is believing that established businesses should utilize a combination of design thinking and strategic thinking.
Okay.
Including Roger Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you've just described is a process of design thinking, but explain that in terms by combining your approach just in terms of learning, experimentation, irritation, and not going. So when you go to a food company and you say, I want to help you sell more, increase your audience, increase your value, What they hear is more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do more marketing. Let's do more sales. Let's find more customers. That's not the only thing that you're doing. So let's just put those two things together in terms of the design thinking philosophy and what you're doing, your approach to these food companies.
Sure. So this whole design behind what I was trying to do initially is, I said, the biggest thing that the companies seem to want is they want to grow the customer base. That's me talking to
Correct.
my initial cohort of customers.
Correct.
That was the language that they used. I want to find more customers.
I 100% agree with you.
So if you want to find more customers, what I can do is I can build a system that tacks into what you're doing right now. You have to give me a minimum or painless amount of input, and I take that input and I generate something of value that more customers come to you with. So, and the whole point of that is I have a concept, a hypothesis of how I'm going to execute on this to find more customers and create value at the same time for you. I don't know if that's true yet. So I have to experiment myself. That's the point of me being a founder.
Yep.
So I said to myself, if I create something, it has to be value add. So it has to be able to tack on to what the business is doing right now. I don't have to be able to build a whole new interface. They log into it and they dick around with buttons and gadgets and widgets and crap. It has to be plug into what they're doing.
So they don't even know you're following an AI-driven approach to this.
No.
Value proposition. Let me try and help and solve a problem for you.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I tack onto the business, it's going to be things like, hey, can I get access to your social media account for Facebook? Hey, can I get access to your whatever sales device you're using? Like, are you using Shopify or using NCR Counterpoint? There's all kinds of different options out there.
Yep.
And then when I get access to your marketing and your sales, then it's cool, we're going to build an apparatus that we can build a middle layer. And that middle layer is going to be a newsletter. And the idea of why I came up with the newsletter is, one, it helps form a cadence. So we have a continuous regular measurement that we can go out and measure responses on. And at the same time, it helps inform both you and your customers on what the middle ground is of your brand. I always use this term of middle ground of brand. You, a lot of businesses in their mind think they understand what their company is and how people will see them and how, but that's not necessarily what their customers think of them.
No, it's not.
So the concept of a middle ground brand is, where is this thing actually existing that's a middle layer between what you think you are and what your customers think you are, because that's a more accurate representation.
So again, just to make sure I understand it correctly, and I know there's various models that your startup can still adopt, but currently it's for food companies that sells online. And you bridge the e-commerce platform with the customer interface with a newsletter.
That's correct.
And you do that because a newsletter allows you to experiment with different messages, calls to action, that add an additional layer of knowledge and insight on top of what they get from their normal analytics.
Yes.
Social media analytics, e-commerce analytics.
Yeah, because I talked about on the last episode, most business owners go into this and just kind of go like that on the social media, and it's either themselves or they hire somebody.
It's being done on the side of the table, yeah.
Yeah, and my take on this is you're doing this, but what's the value, and how do people like it? What do they like about it? And it could be just a time of day. It could be the message. Maybe it's funny. Maybe it's something related to something else. A lot of businesses are well, as long as it gets eyeballs, who cares? And I'm no, you should figure out what resonates, though, because you can build a strategy around that's consistent.
You do need to figure out what resonates, yes.
So to that, the point of a newsletter is some way that we can sit there and consistently look and say who is opening. Because on social media, you get an eyeball check. You can sit there and say this is the number of people that saw it. There's a number of people that give a thumbs up, and there's a number of people that comment, and that's great. Don't get me wrong. That's all beautiful data to have.
It is a necessary level.
Yeah, but with a newsletter, allows you to bring people in and allows you to precisely say, we tried this value proposition, we tried this piece of content in front of them, and then that followed through. My piece of tech can follow through as they go to your website and buy something. So we can say, okay, we had this newsletter, we sent it out to 1,000 people, and out of the 1,000 people, 200 opened it or 400 opened it. And then out of those people that opened it, this is the people that clicked the link, went to the store, and this is the number of people that bought things. So we understand the drop off at each level. And then we can reverse investigate to understand, okay, why do people starting at the very end of it, why did people put things in their cart but then they didn't buy?
Yep.
And then one layer back from that, why did people went on the site to the thing that they found and then say, I don't think I want to buy it. Why did that happen? And you can go through in reverse order, layer by layer, and try to problem solve to crank your numbers up and understand what is the value proposition that gets people to open their email and participate versus what is the value propositions that we think are meaningful that don't actually work.
So the broad concept isn't new.
Mm-hmm.
What does AI allow you to bring to it that gives you that opportunity, the ability to really deliver some interesting value? You've shared some data points with, and I'm using that word specifically because, and I'm not going to discuss it, but you've shared some very interesting data points with me where you say, Werner, I can see this, and this, but I don't know if it means this, and this.
Yes.
So, but it's data points that was not there before.
Mm-hmm.
It's data points that's beginning to point in a certain direction, and it's data points that can start paint a picture in terms of where your value creation lies and how can you increase your base and get them to buy more.
Mm-hmm.
So what has AI allowed you to do that's different than a year ago or 2 years ago, besides the speed of development? What else has it allowed you to do?
It has allowed me to learn what dormant oils are.
Okay.
I say with the biggest shit-eating grin on my face.
Explain that.
So,
please explain that.
So yeah, so one of my customers is in the floriculture space,
yes.
And so I don't know how to write a convincing email to get you to buy like a dozen roses. I don't know how to write a really interesting email to get you to buy some perennials. So by working for this client, what this system that I created does is it looks at people and what they're interested in, comes up with a hypothesis of what it thinks they would be interested in with regards to content. I then present that to the company and goes, is this relevant? Is this meaningful? Is this just a bunch of crap?
Because I don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea. Because I'm just the guy that builds the machine. I have no idea if this is actually contextually relevant to what your consumers want.
Doesn't that go back to the why question?
Yeah. And because it's just building a system that creates content and tests. So the company goes yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. This is meaningful, this is not. And some of the initial stuff that was coming out of the system was just garbage. It was coming out and it was saying hey, go buy seeds in January to plant your beautiful roses. And people were like, well, nobody plants roses in January. It's not a thing. Yeah. So some of this stuff that the system was pumping out using AI, because I had an LLM just dump the message of what it thought people would be interested in this time of year.
Exactly.
So then I said, okay, so it's pulling data from somewhere that's not relevant to Nova Scotia. So I don't know where it's pulling data from. Yeah. We should make it relevant to what this company is working on.
The Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah. So let's go and pull data from something that's relevant. So then we started looking at sales data. So we started pulling out sales data to understand what are people actually buying. Then match that to what pages are people looking at. Then match that to what kind of content and blog content that they're reading on the website. So then it created a profile of what people are interested in, what people click on, and what they ultimately buy relative to timestamp, day of day, year of year, so we can understand what really happens as this business, because the business is, again, floriculture, things change from month to month of what they're selling. So once when we created this profile, it built into a model, and then that model is now producing content. So it learned how to do better content, and now it's more accurate to the point where it can tell the business, no, you should probably be looking at selling these things right now, because you gave me your profitability margin stake, so I understand this is good profitability and this has the best chance of selling. So if you have a leftover inventory from last month, try to sell this off on a discount right now, because this is the best opportunity right now to sell this at a discount, whatever this item is at a discount.
Okay, this is a bit of a curveball. Your experience so far, because my gripe with a lot of folks, business owners, founders, is always that they kind of lack some of them lack foundational financial literacy. You learn it, but there's still too many that kind of just lacks that. And they acknowledge that they lack it. That's not the issue. But what you're talking about is you're talking about a much higher level of data literacy as well. So when you talk to folks, because I can follow what you've described, I understand how it works. You've explained it to me on 10 different phone calls in 10 different ways. So I get it. You know, when we talked about how can we take your startup to the next level. But in your experience, when you speak to potential customers or to these business owners, is there a disconnect in terms of understanding what you're trying to explain to them, or is it just like, yeah, whatever, just show me the output, or what is the frustration there? Because where I'm going with this question is, at the end of the day, and you and I have discussed this, you want them to do this for themselves.
Yes.
You don't want to do this for 100 companies because they can't take that step up to kind of start doing it for themselves.
That's correct.
Explain that.
Sure. So I'll answer that.
Friction.
I like friction.
It is friction.
Yeah, I'll answer that in reverse order. So with regards to companies not doing it, and the reasoning behind that is a lot of companies, like business owners, are busy. I'm not trying to try to tear this down into like something it isn't. Like these people are super busy.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be them. It could be one of their team.
Yeah, it could be one of their team. A lot of companies are pulling staff to do like 2-3 different jobs right now as well.
That as well.
Just because labor is getting more expensive all the time, and I totally understand that as a business owner myself. With regards to companies, what I'm seeing is like companies are either not doing it or they're doing it piecemeal with regards to putting out social media, as I said before.
Agreed.
And if there's also companies just not doing it. There's companies that are just, they don't have a social media profile. They're not updating everything on social media.
Yep, I've spoken to one this week.
Yeah, and to those companies, like you can do that, but what is the expectation of how do you get your message out about what you're working on? How do you tell people this is who I am, this is what the business is trying to achieve, and this is how you get value out of interacting with the business through our products and through our services? I don't know how that happens without some kind of social media profile and you projecting that outwards now. Just because we're in an economy of attention span is like really what we're in right now, not an economy of money. So if you have attention, that's more powerful in my opinion than money right now, because it builds influence.
I would agree with that.
So to that, the point behind this is if you're not doing it, then you're not managing it. And if you're not managing it, you're not, if you're not doing it, you're not measuring it. If you're not measuring it, you're not managing it, right?
That's a logical order, yep.
So in that situation, if nobody is managing it, then you're not at the situation that you can sit there and say, okay, this is my input for costs. So you're going to have like some CFO or maybe like a fractional CFO work for your business and say like, hey, like we need better returns on revenue. And a lot of business owners are going to sit there and go, okay, well, I need to wait 6 months because we're a seasonal business. And then in 6 months' time, that's when the foot traffic comes in and I can make money.
Yeah.
Versus a more savvy business owner is going to say, okay, we need more revenue right now. So we need to put more money in this marketing ad because I know this marketing ad churns out more revenue right now.
Absolutely.
So that's the difference between what I see as the two.
100% with the logic, yeah.
So to put that one aside, going back to the original question, the concept of like what it's trying to create here and what it's ultimately trying to do and how I present this to people, because as you mentioned, there is friction. The first group of companies that I presented my concept to told me to go take a hike. The reason why is because I came at this from a point of view of explaining to them my AI system and how I was going to build it out and how I was going to generate these really cool answers, showing them demonstrations of how it worked. And they were like, get the out of here, nerd. Like you're like I'm not even interested in going through this. Yeah. And one of my first customers, actually my first customer, I remember talking to him and I said like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Isn't that cool? And he's like, no. And he was just like, just straight up like, no, it's not even remotely interesting. Oh, yeah, okay. And I go, okay. And the thing that turned it around was me asking him, well, if that's the case, what do you do to determine like average customer lifetime value? What do you mean? What is that? And I'm like, so in financing management point of view, you should understand what that number is.
Of course you do.
So that we can understand what the unit economics is to acquire new customers, because acquiring customers has a cost innately to it.
Okay, so what you did, you brought 3 concepts, financial concepts to it: customer lifetime value,
yep,
unit cost.
That's right.
And?
Acquisition cost.
Yep.
And to the business owner, he's like, I don't like, I know his response was like, I know what the average order value is for the median customer. And I go, well, that's great.
Yeah.
That is good to know. But at the
Pretty
same
basic.
time, yeah, we need to understand what the unit economic costs are to acquire customers. Because if you're, my argument is if you're paying money to acquire a customer and they buy something and then they walk out the door and they never come back, was that a good spend?
Fair.
Or is it a better spend to take your current customers that are here and get them to buy one more thing while they're in the store?
Yep.
Which one is better? And he's like, I don't know. So I'm like, cool. So we need to investigate and figure that out.
Let's go and find out.
So I dropped the whole AI thing and I said, let's just do that. And I came in it from a finance literacy analysis point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, well, in order to do that, we have to build out this whole content engine to examine it under like a lab testing. So we did that. And then as we were doing it, revenue started going up. And then we went, oh, look, revenue goes up when you manage it. Oh, that's so funny.
What was the reaction though when it started happening?
So like it's
Did they believe it?
yes and no. So there's like still arguments because like at the end of the day, you can only do so much to make an argument. And this is like typical marketing people is they're going to sit there and say, look at the amount of money I generated millions of dollars for you. And you go, yeah, but you didn't make every sale. You didn't have like every single marketing influence.
Exactly.
It's like, what did you actually do to contribute to this conversion that happened on our number sheet?
A huge question.
So there has to be some argument over what is the measured contribution that leads to a sale. And this is like a deep philosophical argument. And then to that, like, are you selling to my customers that are currently here? Are you selling to new customers? So you have to be able to demonstrate who are the new customers versus who are the old customers. Because if you're selling to John McDonald that comes in and he's been your customer for 30 years and then he's on your system and he bought something, it's like, well, Matt, is he really a new customer or is he just using your system and now he's just buying something and we just didn't measure him as a customer before?
Fair question.
Yeah. So to that, the key thing that I measured to say, like, this is how I know that I think I'm a sale, weird way of phrasing it, but it's the way that I measured it was saying if they're not in the data, if they're not a customer in the customer database, that's a new customer.
Mm-hmm.
And end of discussion.
Yep.
You can sit there and make an argument with me saying, oh, they're not new. You didn't write them down. They're a new customer. It is what it is. Second to that, if you have customers that are wholesale that are buying retail, because there are people that do that. There are people that I know this sounds strange because people are like, well, Sobeys isn't retail. What happens is you have small business owners that are going to come into your store and they're normally buying from you wholesale, but then they send in their brother, their wife, their whomever to like place a large order and it's through the retail store. So you're going to have like anomalies where your retail store comes in at like $8,000 in one purchase. And you're like, wow, that seems really high because our average order value is a lot lower than that. Oh, suspicious. And then you look into it and you realize it's like the wife of some like wholesaler that was in about that day. So is that really like a retail audience member buying there? Because like if the goal is to expand retail sales, that can't really be counted. And like that's a legitimate claim. I understand that. So it gets down to, okay, but what is the way that you, Matt, say that this person in retail bought? My conditions are they're a new customer. At the same time, they're on a newsletter. They were served marketing content. They opened the email, they clicked through, and then I measured on the website that they bought something. So I can track all of those individual points.
So what you're also beginning to do in your process then is you're beginning to help them develop certain structures, framework, and discipline around stuff that might have been not defined well or not understood well or just assumed.
Mm-hmm.
Because the biggest challenge that I have with many clients is to get them out of that, it is what it is kind of mindset. There's an expectation that year after year, this is what's going to be generated. Mm-hmm. This is what's to expect. And one thing that I like about your approach is that it actually questions that. It actually brings them, and that's why I think the friction is healthy, because it actually forces them to start asking questions that they've never asked.
Yeah, and like before. That's
and
really
I
important.
Like that. I like that because I think that's the first step, and not just saying I'm a learning organization. Because you ask anybody and they'll say, yeah, we're a learning organization, or we know we need to be one, but very, very few actually are. Now, and I know I've put you on the spot a few times today. Now, something else.
Oh, I love it.
I'm glad you do. So, let's say you have your own startup.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no available data.
Mm-hmm.
You've only started selling. Excuse me. You only started selling online, and you're building things up from the ground up. Sorry, Matthew. Will your approach work for startups as well, or is it primarily applicable for established businesses?
So I am working right now with established businesses. The issue is that I don't see as any issue with regards to selling to startups, just because the trick, the kind of facade that I'm doing here that allows us to experiment is the concept of the newsletter. So everybody I say everybody, most companies that want to build an audience use a newsletter because it's some means to test out like what is the verbiage, what is the content, what is the use case my audience sees as the business and how they're going to be using what I'm creating. By doing what what Black Anvil is creating through this newsletter, we get to do the normal, typical startup newsletter, sending out to people. Like Black Anvil has its own newsletter, for example, where it sends out content to people consume it. You can go subscribe to blackanvil.ca. Just go to the bottom of the website.
I was wondering when you're going to do that.
Yeah, shameless self-plugs. Got to get them in, all right? And
it actually isn't. It's an opportunity to learn together.
Yeah.
To be honest.
And that's the point behind it, is like there are people out there that want solutions to the problems that they're facing today, and you can be part of that solution to the various problems that they're facing. But how did they find you? How do they learn about you? How do they learn about your struggles and how you overcome them and what value you can create for them as an individual, right? With the newsletter, that gives startups the ability to experiment. Like I did this back in Food Bite. Like the very first newsletter, the content that we came out with was arguably kind of stupid, but it worked in the sense that I just reached out to people. Yeah, and like I just reached out to people and I was like, hey, there was all food companies, and I said, I'm just curious, who out there has a food safety program right now? And could you like do this like quick little survey so we understand like what kind of food safety do you have? So then we would ask them questions like, are you under GFSI? If so, like what GFSI program are you? How many audits have you had? How long have you had your food safety program? Do you have a food safety manager? Like questions like that. And I just sent it to companies and I'm like, hey, like I'm just looking to get some feedback from people, and whatever I get as results, if you're interested, just click a little button below and I'll send you the results. And then people did the survey, and a lot of companies came back saying, I'm really interested in the results to see like what else is out there. So then I started handing back the results, and it became a weekly thing where every week I would ask a question, and then the next week I would give the results of the survey from the previous week, and then I would give my take on the analysis there. And then I would say, this is the question I'm going to ask next week. And then next week's survey is about this topic. And it just became this rolling bi-weekly thing where every month I would have 2 surveys and I would have 2 analytical feedback points. And we did that for food companies. We did it for food safety people. We did it for kind of like an ecosystem we built online.
So what you did is you personalized it per audience.
Yeah.
Yep. And that is the secret. So to conclude this part of our conversation, so 100% for sure, AI isn't just about hype. There's a very specific value-driven approach that should be followed and can be followed. Before we get to the next section, just something that I thought about while you were talking. As a developer, what's the one thing that you like most about AI, and what's the thing that you hate most about AI? And I know hate is a strong word, but I do want to use it because you live with it every single day. You look at it from a different perspective than non-developers. So what is it that you like most about it, and what is it that you dislike most about it?
So I really like modern AI in the sense that it's getting closer and closer to human biology and how we as humans think and learn over time.
I love that answer, and I'm very glad you said modern AI. You phrased that really well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you look at large language models,
Yes.
large language models learn words and the context and the meaning of
Yes,
those
of
words,
course it does.
just like you and me, just like the listener to this podcast right now.
Yes.
It does it by sitting there and seeing phrases, seeing different sentences with different words and understanding the context and meaning around them and the linkage to other words that give context to the meaning of those words. So it builds out this giant, ever-expanding web of words and their relations to one another. So if you ever sit there and use the word, I don't know, it's like a really funky word. Actually, like here's an example. Young people listening right now, here's some cool slang. Riz.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like Werner has like no idea what I'm talking about because he has no, exactly, he has no framework or understanding what that.
Look it up, though.
Oh no, please don't.
Okay.
So like that's a young person's slang word that we use for a specific thing, and we understand the context and how to use it. But is it a real word? No, not really. But like we learn that phrase, we learn that word, we learn that meaning, and to that like. The process of which we underwent that is the same of how a large language model learns over time. We didn't have somebody sit down and explain, this is the meaning of what Riz is, and this is appropriate context. Or so we just hear other people use the word, and then we go, oh, that's the meaning of word and how it fits into that.
For sure.
So
what do you dislike?
What do I dislike?
And don't give me the ethical thing. It's a personal development.
I'm fighting back this inner computer scientist right now that's clawing out of the pit.
It's what you hate most when you sit behind your screen and you use it. It's not about ethics or what do you hate most about it?
Let me tell you about something really cool that us computer scientists talk about. It's called dead internet theory. Are you familiar with it?
Fascinated to hear about it.
So us computer scientists have got together and we say the internet is dead.
Yeah.
Human beings are not on the internet with respect to the amount of people that are on, like the amount of accounts is a better way of saying it.
Yeah. I get it. Yep.
So an example of what I mean is like if you look at Facebook and you're like, hey, how many accounts are on Facebook? There's like almost more accounts on Facebook than there are human actual living people.
I get the concept.
So you probably are looking at some bots. So
most likely.
It first dawned on me on LinkedIn where there was a VC that had, supposedly a VC that had a paid post that was boosted. And he was talking, I remember the guy's wearing sunglasses and he was going, yo, like, hey, young founders, got this cool new model. And he's like dropping this idea of like what we could do with a startup. And it had like a whole bunch of us startup founders like pick it apart going like, this is stupid. Like, why would anybody do this? And then you had a whole bunch of other comments of people on that thread just like having, strangely enough, like a worded response that is like a couple sentences long that is verbatim the exact same thing stated over and over and over. And I'm like, that's really creepy and weird. And I made a post about it on my LinkedIn saying, I think that this guy's actually just a robot. And I think everybody here that's saying the exact same thing is also a robot because you all made your account on the same day and you all saying the same thing.
Weird.
So I brought that to the attention of one of my friends. I'm not going to say who he is. I'm not going to say where he is. I'm not going to say what he works on. But he is a developer of sorts, a bit of an experimenter. And I said like, hey, like I saw this thing on LinkedIn. What do you think? And he's like, oh yeah, it's 100% a bot network. I was like, man, that's crazy that like LinkedIn's got bot networks. And the guy posted me and he's like,
don't get me going on LinkedIn.
Well, he was like, oh, like I have a bot network on Twitter. And I was like, oh, you have a bot network? Yeah. And he just like showed me and I was like, cool. Like, what do you do with this? And he's like, so I have like a ChatGPT model that I built and I point it at an influencer that you think would represent your brand and it steals the context of all their posts. And then it goes on and it creates a fake account for itself, starts like posting and the other bots in the network all link to this post to boost it artificially. And then that influencer, you just pay me a monthly fee and that influencer represents your brand online and gets artificially boosted in my network. So you can just pay me a monthly fee as to basically have a content creator write nonsense about you to boost you artificially on Twitter.
So I kind of have a picture of how that kind of developer coder looks like and kind of how his office or studio looks like. But how does that feed into what you dislike most?
I dislike most because we're we're taking the absolute bottom feeding worst part about human psychology, which is exchanging value propositions with one another.
Yeah.
And we're automating it and just machine gunning it at each other at the highest volume nonstop every day. And my take on this is that's probably not good for us. It's probably not good for anybody any human being that wants to have like a good mental health record in today's society.
I get that.
And at the same time, the reason why they're doing it is not because like this is economic or it makes even sense. It's because it's lazy. Like if you look at like what Black Anvil is doing is like, this is, as you mentioned before, it's a learning engine for the company. The company is learning what works and what doesn't, and they discard what doesn't work so they train and get better over time. But what I'm seeing is that people just machine gun it out because they don't want to actually take the effort to learn anything. They're just saying, oh, well, like the AI will figure it out. And it's just constantly nonstop machine gunning all the time rather than actually looking at this saying, how do I improve?
Interesting you say that. And I do want to talk about this more at another occasion. But I'm actually writing about it, and in my language I call it compounding ignorance. Because just like compounding interest, it builds on each other.
Okay.
For me, there's just ignorance building on ignorance, building on ignorance, building on ignorance. And it's got nothing to do with being smart or educated or anything like that. It's just, yeah. I didn't expect that answer, by the way, and I think it's a really, really good answer. It's making me think. I get it. Last thing for today. So if there's one thing, and I've got one thing as well that I want to leave with folks. So this one thing, what I hope people will take out of it is that they are motivated to do this one thing in the next 7 days. Just one thing, because everybody's busy. Either startup, business, problems, challenges, opportunities, but just one thing that you and me want them to focus on. What's that one thing that you would like founders to ask themselves or to look at over the next few days?
Oh, I do this with a lot of founders. The little exercise, I think you've seen me do this exercise with them where I say like, so what's wrong with your business right now? Oh, everything's going great. Everything's wonderful. It's all roses and daisies. Yeah, and I'm terrified when I hear that answer because I go, okay, so are you like a billionaire yet? Like, are you on the path to being a billionaire? Like, what are you at $1 trillion valuation? No, I'm struggling to get my first customer. Oh, okay. So how long have you been at this? Oh, I've been at it for like 2 to 3 years, somewhere like in between. Oh, okay.
Yes, Matthew.
So what's the problem? Well, like people just don't understand what I'm selling, and like people are just dumb and they don't get it and stuff. And I go, okay, so like you're gonna hit the like when are you gonna get your first customer on? Oh, like as soon as I create this like new widget that I think people are interested in. Okay, cool. So you think people are this new piece that you bring in? That's when everybody jumps on board and signs up and buys your stuff, right? And they're like, yep. And I go, okay, cool. Let's start. How many paying customers do you have right now that are using that thing that you're building out? Like how many prepayments have you received? Oh, I haven't received any. Okay. How many letters of intent of prepayments do you have?
Very important.
I don't have it. What's a letter of intent? Okay. Well, if you don't have any letters of intent, how many people do you have right now that are sending you emails saying like, when it's done, I'm interested. Just let me know what the price point is going to be.
Very, very good questions.
Okay, I don't have anybody sending me that kind of stuff right now. Okay, well, how many people do you have on your newsletter that you're projecting out right now that you're saying you're working on this?
Yes.
I don't have a newsletter. Okay, well, how many people do you have that are on your website and that you're going to have a newsletter on later, but how many people are on your website like month to month? I don't know. I'm not looking at it.
Yep.
So
It sounds hard to believe, but I know a few of those as well.
So if you're a business owner, if you're a founder, if you are somebody that wants to create value and create revenue for yourself, you should be able to start answering these questions now and start figuring out how that builds into some kind of silo, ecosystem, funnel, and then be able to put back to yourself, what do I need to do as a founder today, right here, right now, for myself to be able to say I can get one more person in this funnel?
Yep.
Or take somebody that's in this funnel and move them one rung down.
Yes, exactly.
And if you're sitting there saying, I don't know, listen to me. do yourself a favor, find somebody that can help you. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be Werner. It doesn't have to be anybody.
Or find something else to do.
You just need somebody to help you do that. As a founder, I'm telling you, as a technical guy, you're not going to be able to answer all the questions. You're not going to have solutions for everything. Find what your weaknesses are and find people that can help you solve that problem.
Agree 100%. So the one thing that I would leave with business owners, even founders, is that, and don't think about this too much, just ask, either look yourself or just ask one of your team members to look at what was your best performing social media post ever. Make sure that you distinguish between what was boosted, not boosted. Just make sure that you understand the context. More than likely, you'll find yourself surprised by the post that performed the best. And more than likely, it was a impromptu post or content that wasn't really planned or wasn't part of a longer-term campaign or strategy. Once you've identified that post, ask yourself, do you really know why it performed well? That's it. Don't think about it too much. Just ask yourself, why has this post performed so well? And if you can answer that, compare what you are doing, analyze what you're doing, see if there's an alignment. If you cannot answer that, you don't have to speak to Matthew or myself, but find somebody that can help you figure out why that post is done well. That's what I want you to do, and that's what I suggest you do over the next few days.
Thank you, Dr. Werner.
Oh, my word, Matthew. Not yet.